Here's a little fun fact about my childhood. So I grew up in a small town in Minnesota, and pretty much anybody who grew up in a small town will agree that there's not a damn thing to do there. There's a small movie theater that shows one new movie every weekend, there's a grocery store that only the locals go to, and there are some small shops that have probably closed since I moved away. One place I distinctly remember is the local movie rental store. This wasn't a Blockbuster or Family Video, this is a local store that I don't even remember the name of. I don't remember there being a sign or anything, it was just where you go if you wanted to rent a movie in town. It had tall, whitewashed shelves that I assume were built by the owner that displayed all the movies available to rent. It was always kind of dark, so if you wanted to read about a movie, then you'd have to take the DVD case to another part of the store just so you could see it, and the owner was always sitting at the desk watching something on the little TV he had next to him. I went there a bunch of times as a kid and rented a bunch of movies over the years. It was always fun. With the advancement of technology though, eventually it kind of became pointless to go there. When I got an iPhone, I could just rent any movie I wanted from iTunes. Plus eventually they installed a Redbox outside of the Dollar General in town, so unfortunately I don't think that local store I remember is still around. And as of July 2024, the same can be said about Redbox. Physical movie rentals have been on the way out for years now, so it's not surprising. I got my first iPhone in the early 2010s, so that's almost 15 years of physical rentals just being redundant. Of course, other factors have kept them going, like the quality of people's internet connection and just personal preferences, but we've kind of reached a point where those aren't huge contributing factors anymore. Especially since watching movies as a whole has changed so much that renting a movie from anywhere just seems pointless. Just wait for it to get added to one of the 57 streaming services. Still, it's a little sad because renting movies has been around since people started watching movies at home. And actually, the advent of streaming services is kind of the result of the same thing that led to rentals in the first place.
You might call me an experience center. You see, I can bring you whatever you want to see, whenever you want to see it. Sound impossible? Not for Cartrivision.
Before the 1970s, if you wanted to watch a movie, you'd usually have to wait for it to be in theaters. There were some exceptions, of course. Older movies like The Wizard of Oz were being broadcast on TV as early as 1956, but if you wanted to watch the latest movies, you'd have to watch them in the theater, and if you missed it, you'd just have to wait for it to come back to the theaters. Then at the Consumer Electronics Show in 1970, Avco Corp introduced Cartrivision, a videotape cartridge that would allow anybody to watch the latest movies from the comfort of their home. Kind of. So you've got to keep in mind that at this point in time, the only way movie studios were making money from their movies was from people going to see it in theaters. If people could buy a movie once and then watch it at home whenever they wanted, then movie studios would make less money, and obviously we can't have that. As a result, Cartrivision was not allowed to sell major movie releases on their tapes, but they were allowed to rent them out. Cartrivision tapes came in two different types. There were black tapes that you could buy and keep forever, which had things like sporting events and travel videos, and then there were red tapes, which were only available to rent, and they were the only way to watch theatrical releases at home, like Dr. Strangelove and Bridge Over the River Kwai. The black tapes work exactly like you'd expect, if you know how video cassettes work. You can watch it, pause it, rewind it, and watch it again as much as you want. The red tapes, however, were a bit different. You see, movie studios really didn't like the idea of people owning movies to watch at home. And since there was nothing to stop people from just keeping their rentals after watching them, they had to come up with something to prevent that from happening. So the red tapes had a different design to them. You could watch them and pause them just like the black tapes, but you couldn't rewind them. After you watched it once, that was it. You would just return it to the store you rented it from, and then they would rewind it using a special machine. This didn't stop people from keeping their rentals though. Apparently they didn't consider the fact that people at home could just take a screwdriver and open the cartridge to rewind it by hand, which is why these days, a lot of red tapes have their screws exposed instead of being covered by the movie art. So you might have seen this and thought, how does that even work? That doesn't look like any videotape I've ever seen. Well, it actually works pretty much like every other videotape out there. The tape itself is a similar kind of magnetic tape used in VHS tapes. There are two reels on the back, one on top of the other, that hold the tape, and as it plays, it rolls from one reel to the other. As the tape is rolled onto the reels, it would pass through the top, and the player would read it and display whatever was on there. As for why they decided to orient the reels like this, I have no idea. There was even another video cassette tape that came out before Cartrivision that did have the reels side by side, like most other videotapes do. This was called the U-Matic, which wasn't ever a consumer product and was only used in the film/TV industry. So if you wanted to rent a movie on Cartrivision, how would that work? Well, it's pretty simple. You would go to your local Cartrivision retailer, so something like a Sears or a Montgomery Ward. This was the 70s, these were popular stores back then, and they'd have a catalog of movies to choose from. They were categorized like you'd expect: drama, western, adventure, porn, and so on. You'd pick the movie you want, you'd wait for it to get mailed to your house, you'd watch it once, and then you'd take it back to the store you ordered it from. As for the black tapes, the ones you could buy outright, I actually don't know. I assume they were just on the shelves of the department store and you could just buy them like anything else. The thing is, considering how influential Cartrivision was, since it was the first time people could watch newer releases at home and the first movie rental service ever, there's surprisingly little information about it. The Wikipedia for it only has a total of 579 words, and at this point in my script, I've written about double that amount. This is mostly due to the fact that Cartrivision wasn't even remotely successful. Avco Corp started selling Cartrivision tapes in June of 1972, and they were discontinued in July of 1973. 13 months these were available to buy and rent, and for good reason. While the idea of renting tapes to watch movies at home was a good idea, the way they went about it was just not practical at all. Today, if you want to watch a DVD or a Blu-ray, all you'd have to do is plug a DVD player into your TV and you're all set. When it came to Cartrivision though, there wasn't a player to buy and plug in. The only option was a TV set with the player built in. At the time, the TV set cost $1,350, which would be about $9,500 today. To be somewhat fair though, some retailers had the option to rent the TV just like you could rent the tapes. But this was in the 70s. These were not small TVs. Obviously, most people were not willing to invest $10,000 into a new TV just to have the option to rent adultery for fun and profit, and renting a TV that probably weighed 100 pounds was a pretty big ask. And that's not even factoring in the cost of the tapes themselves. Finding accurate prices for them is difficult, but I actually have some documents that show the sales information for the tapes, which are very delicate, so I will scan them in later. According to these, if you bought a black tape, it'd cost you between $14 and $33, depending on the type of program that you were buying. And no, I don't know the difference between JJ, NN, TT, and WW, but that would be between $107 and $253 today. And if you wanted to rent a red tape, it would cost you $40 or $50, depending on whether it comes on 1 or 2 tapes, or between $307 and $384 today. And that cost can go up to $60 for porn, or $461 today. At the time, the average cost to see a movie in theaters was about $1.73, or $12.98 today, so it's pretty easy to see why customers weren't too eager to invest in this new idea. It really is a shame though, because they had some innovative ideas. We already talked about the rental service, but there was also Cartrivision cameras that let you record home videos. They were in black and white, but there was a color camera being developed before they were discontinued. There were also plans to release a separate Cartrivision player so people wouldn't have to buy a whole new TV, but it never came to be. And since there were already blank tapes that you could buy, there was even an option to record live TV on them. And actually, there's an entire story about a basketball fan who had the only footage in the world of Game 5 of the 1973 NBA Finals because he recorded it on a Cartrivision tape. I'm not going to get into that story, but if you're interested, there is a documentary about it called Lost and Found, the 73 Knicks Championship Tape. Like I said at the beginning, movie rentals and even physical media as a whole are falling by the wayside. New releases show up on Netflix just a couple months after their debut, and sometimes not even that long. And since most of us already have a subscription to some kind of streaming service, it just makes more sense to watch movies on there. But this really is just an extension of what led to Cartrivision Red tapes. Studios don't want you owning your movies. With Cartrivision, that meant you could only rent movies, so you'd have to keep giving them money to watch it again. Today, that means every movie studio has their own streaming service, so you have to keep giving them money to keep watching. For most people, this is just fine. It's convenient, relatively cheap if you're only subscribed to 1 or 2 streaming services, and there's usually something good to watch. Overall though, it is a problem. Movie studios are corporations, and corporations don't actually care about the people paying for their services. That's why they're always going to raise their prices every couple of years, even though a lot of them barely work the way they should. Also, did you know Netflix costs $10 a month in 2016? That included their entire library with 0 ads, and people got mad because they raised it from $8. Compare that to today, where their subscription with ads costs $8 a month and doesn't even include their entire library, and their ad-free subscription costs $18 a month. Plus they have a premium subscription for $25 a month, and the only thing it gives you is access to 4K movies and 2 more devices to watch on. And all of this is ignoring the fact that if studios want to, they could just decide that they don't want anyone watching something. Like when HBO decided to remove Westworld from their library, which is an HBO original. I know the focus of this video was Cartrivision, but if you take anything from this, it's just don't trust corporations, especially major movie studios, because they will fuck you every chance they get. Buy physical copies of your movies, because then they can't take more of your money, and they can't take your movies away from you. Anyway, Cartrivision has always been super interesting to me. Just the fact that it was the first time people could watch movies at home, and yet almost no one knows about it is kind of wild, but it makes sense. With the way it was started, Cartrivision was never going to be successful. But it did start the conversation about owning movies to watch at home, which has led us to where we are now. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'll let you decide.